This is a special bonus episode of the Death to Tyrants podcast.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Hey, what is up, you guys? Thank you for being here. This is a bonus episode. So, obviously, some stuff has happened in Iran. Whenever big news happens in the world of foreign policy, I'm not going to trust the corporate media or people on Facebook or Twitter. Who I'm going to trust is Scott Horton. Most of you guys probably are very familiar with who Scott is. He is the foreign policy guru, in my opinion, and he is interviewed and written and published extensively on foreign policy since way back in early 2000. He's done over 5,000 interviews on this kind of stuff, and he's the man to go to when some stuff is going down. So I won't waste your time much longer here. We're going to get right into it. Welcome, Scott Horton. Thank you for being here on Death to Tyrants.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, when something goes down in the world of foreign policy, the last people I trust is the people on the TV, basically. And, I think that's well-deserved mistrust. But I do trust you. So I'm going to do this quick episode. What's exactly going on? Who are the actors involved here? And why did this happen?
Okay, well, it's kind of a complicated mess. But the most important thing to understand is that America fought Iraq War II. That is George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq and the 6-year war after that for the guys that we're fighting right now. In fact, the guys that we're fighting right now are actually our allies. Still, the reason our troops are in Iraq right now is to help those Shiite militias and the Shiite government and Iraqi army kill the last of the ISIS fighters. Used to be called Al-Qaeda in Iraq back in Iraq War II. Now it's what's left of the Islamic State, which is just, again, a low-level insurgency, a group, no longer a state at all. But that's why our troops are there in the first place, is to fight with these Shiite militias against the last of the radical Sunni bin Ladenites left in the country. So that's the important point of all this is, to focus on the irony of the reality that America's foreign policy, including the invasion of Iraq itself, was largely meant to weaken Iran. Iran is, having a full-fledged war of regime change against Persia. It's just too much. A CIA coup back in 1953, sure, but we can't replicate that now. We can't do a full-scale war against them. But the neocons believed if they would get rid of Saddam in Iraq and America dominated Iraq, then that would give us more sway over Iran. And that didn't happen. Instead, America really worked that whole time just to put Iran's friends in power and get kicked right out again. And it was not Obama, it was Bush himself who actually turned the whole policy around in 2006 and 2007. They kind of launched Operation Oops, where they called it the redirection. You can read about this in the great reporter Seymour Hersh has a wonderful piece about this in 2007. The redirection, where they decided essentially they would say sorry to the Saudi king for fighting a whole war for the Iranians that America and the Saudis and their Sunni allies hate so much, and we'd tilt back toward the Sunnis. Well, what that meant in practice was arming Al-Qaeda guys. The Saudis don't really have an army other than the U.S. Army. What they do have is, Al-Qaeda suicide bomber shock troops. In fact, they'd help finance the Sunni insurgency against the Americans and the Shiites we were fighting for during Iraq War II. Well, in practice, this, it meant under Bush backing some of these terrorist groups in Iran and Syria. But what it really meant was under Obama, continuing the same policy, was backing the Al-Qaeda suicide, bin Ladenite radical Sunni terrorists against the Assad regime in Syria. And it was America, Saudi, Turkey, Israel, and Qatar all working together to support these radical Sunni groups in order to weaken Iran, is sort of see if we could take their ally in Damascus away from them as a consolation prize for giving them Baghdad. And of course, what happened instead was they built up this Islamic State group, really, the Islamic Caliphate thing that George Bush had always warned of. They built it up in eastern Syria. But instead of moving west and conquering western Syria and overthrowing the government in Damascus, instead they went east and invaded western Iraq and seized all of predominantly Sunni western Iraq in 2014. So then what Obama had to do? Then he launched Iraq War III in order to what? Again, ally with the Shiite militias that they wish they hadn't fought Iraq War II for. Now had to ally with them again to destroy the Islamic State that they had built up to hurt them, that had just blown up too big in America's face in such an embarrassing way, with this guy Baghdadi declaring himself the Caliph Ibrahim and all of this stuff. So they went and they essentially fought another war for these same Shiites, friends with Iran, that they wish they hadn't. Now they're embedded there fighting the last remnants in Iraq War 3.5 of ISIS. But at the same time, over the last 6 months or so, the Israelis have been bombing these same Shiite militias, claiming that the Iranians are sending arms through Iraq to these groups to somehow use against Israel. Possibly, I guess the rumor is that supposedly they're shipping the weapons onto Syria or onto Hezbollah in southern Lebanon or something. So the Americans have been at least standing by, if not helping, while the Israelis have been attacking these same Shiite militias. And so apparently in retribution, they launched a rocket into an American base where they killed an American contractor and wounded a couple of GIs. And then this was alleged to be an Iranian orchestrated attack. And so this was last Friday. And so on Sunday, I believe it was, in revenge, the Trump administration attacked this Shiite militia base, they claim, and killed about 25 or 27 people in response to that. So then that caused this massive riot at the embassy. Now, the idea is that they were afraid that there was going to be a Benghazi type incident, but all of the State Department officials were gone and there's nothing but Marines left there. It's a very well fortified embassy. It's not like the ad hoc little consulate that they had set up in Benghazi to run jihadists and guns off to Syria back in 2012. It's a totally different situation there. And if you look at the actual protest, all they did was get inside the visitors gate a little bit. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was attacked. And the cops were there the whole time and let them get inside the gate, but just barely. In other words, again, these are our allies in the Shiite Iraqi government that George Bush installed in power there. And so they were kind of sending a signal that we wish you hadn't done that. But that was about it. And then the protest was over. And then, for the Trump government to then react to that by killing Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force, the Iranian Quds Force, is a major escalation. And we don't, certainly on TV, they don't portray it this way. But you have to stop. I mean, never mind. We're all Americans here, right? It's not about whose side you're on or anything like that. But you just got to be an adult and just stop and ask yourself and put the shoe on the other foot and see what would the reaction be if the Iranians had assassinated James Mattis or David Petraeus or one of these most famous American generals. And what if, in fact, instead of losing a bunch of wars like Mattis and Petraeus, they were actually the heroes the PR guys made them out to be, facing down, destroying ISIS when the Americans sicked it on them and that kind of thing. This guy, well, just imagine somebody of that stature, an American general or, leader of the CIA or something, being assassinated by the Iranians, the way we would respond to that. But on the Americans, from the Americans' point of view, the Iranians are supposed to just take it. This was meant, and Trump made this clear in his statement today. The way he put it, it's kind of funny. He said, "We're not doing this to start a war. We're doing this to stop a war. That this is meant to be the last word. You don't mess with me, or I'll kill your number one general," kind of a thing. But then that's it. Now we're calling on you Iranians, as Pompeo put it in 3 or 4 different tweets in a row. We have a policy of de-escalation after killing their top general. And we demand that you Iranians sit still now and don't you dare respond, or else we'll really get mad. And that was pretty much what Trump said in his statement too. So, I mean, I think as far as it goes, that's true. They weren't trying to start a war with Iran here, or even Iraq War 4 with the government that they install in power. They run the risk of that, certainly. And it's, I think, certain that the Iranians will do something to respond. But I think lucky for us, the Ayatollah is not the lunatic that they portray him as. He's actually a pretty cool customer when it comes to stuff like this. And, so far he's made some threats, but hasn't followed through yet. The idea is it's not exactly mutually assured destruction like we had with the Russians in the Cold War or something, but essentially the Americans and the Iranians can cause enough damage to each other and each other's interests in the region as to really hopefully deter each other from real conflict. Iran could never attack the United States. They have no navy. They have 1 or 2 battleships, no blue water navy whatsoever. Bunch of speedboats, bunch of planes that Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford gave them back before I was born. And they have no ability to attack the U.S. They do have the ability to defend themselves. They have plenty of missiles, and we have plenty of GIs in range of their missiles in the Middle East, in Kuwait, in Iraq, Afghanistan, in Qatar and Bahrain, and all up and down the Persian Gulf, and Saudi Arabia, and so forth, are American forces. So that should be enough to dissuade the Americans from doing anything much worse. And then, of course, the Iranians know that comes down to it, our Navy and our Air Force can absolutely pummel the hell out of their country and maybe not achieve a regime change, but could cause a massive amount of damage to their military forces and their cities and God knows what else. And they know that, and they don't want a real fight either. So hope for the best and, focus on the narrative here of the other side, that of the hawks here. It goes without saying on TV that, our government is doing something. Well, it must have had to, or it wouldn't have. We all know that. And it just goes without saying that this must be great or it wouldn't be happening at all, and this kind of thing. Or, I almost regret that the Democrats are saying a couple of good things about this. Mm-hmm. They're absolutely horrible 99% of the time, are completely unreliable when it comes to anything important. And in this case, they just make it look like, Nancy Pelosi and all the Nancy boy wimpy Democrats, they don't want to fight, but come on, right-wing macho tough guys. Well, let's go face down the mean old Islamic terrorists. And it so just plays into the narrative. And nobody on TV, the only person I've seen on TV so far is the conservative Colonel Douglas McGregor on Fox News. Said, this is George W. Bush did this. Put these guys in power. We're not fighting our enemies here. We're fighting our allies here. Why don't we not do this? Why don't we just get out of the way? Why don't we disengage from the Middle East entirely instead of continuing to insist on dominating a region that more and more, because of America's actions in Iraq and Syria, are more and more under Iranian influence? At some point, what are you going to do? Get in a time machine and wish you hadn't supported George W. Bush back when? Wish you hadn't supported Barack Obama a little bit later? This is the history of the world. Mm-hmm. It's already done.
Well, what do you suspect? You are making me feel a little bit better. I know Iran can't do much. Of course, they can do stuff to the people that are over there, which would be nice to have them back home. What do you suspect is the fallout of this then?
I really don't know. I mean, the reality is that Trump could do just about anything. And I don't know. You know what? The politics inside Iran right now must be going completely nuts at a fever pitch with this assassination. And I'm totally making this up. I don't have firsthand knowledge of this or secondhand knowledge of this even. But there's, every reason to think that the doves, such as they are, in the Iranian government will now be marginalized and will now have hawks shouting, "We told you so," in their faces. The current president, Rouhani, risked everything to sign the nuclear deal with the Obama government, which was the best thing that the Obama government did the whole time they were in power there. And then Trump came in and ruined it for no reason whatsoever. Canceled the thing based on a bunch of fake reasons, a bunch of lies about the program, about the inspections and the limits and everything else about the deal. And, ratcheted up this whole policy attention for essentially no reason. So in a way, there's really nothing to fight about here. The only problem is you got to get the Americans to back down. And because the Iranians aren't going to back down after they already did back down to a great degree and made major concessions to join that deal. And, I don't know, but when it comes to their ability to hit back against the United States, if they want to be creative, I think they can cause a lot of damage, and they'll probably try to do it in deniable ways. Oh, your tanker blew up, this kind of thing. Your the Houthis in Yemen, their drone research program is better financed than ever before, huh? You don't say. And this kind of thing. But who knows? I mean, I think they have the reach. If they really want to try, I think they have the reach. They could probably use Hezbollah to hit targets in Europe and Asia and Africa and who knows where. Possibly in Latin America too. If it was a real war, they could do a lot. But if they wanted to just kind of, stick with the asymmetric attacks, deniable type activities, could see assassinations, terrorist attacks against America's friends and allies in ways that aren't direct attacks against us and aren't direct provocations for further escalation on their side, but is, a way for them to get their point across. I mean, that's hoping for the best right there, I'm afraid to say. The idea that they're going to do nothing about it is essentially impossible. So it's just crazy. It's picking a fight for no reason, really. I mean, look at the Iran deal. They were never making nukes in the first place. They were under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and had a safeguards agreement with the IAEA already. They were verified and guaranteed to have not diverted any of their nuclear material to any military purpose. They never enriched to weapons grade. And they never had a program to develop an atomic bomb. The whole thing, this entire century long about Iran and their nuclear program has been a bunch of built up hype. Then Obama says, listen, he didn't say this part out loud, but as fake as the controversy is here, we're going to put it to bed. By signing this deal, we're going to double extra verify the non-military nature of their nuclear program. And that'll at least take war off the table. And we can try to move forward from there. And then America just decided, under the Trump government, that nope, that's not good enough. This nuclear deal, it has to include things about missiles and Hamas and whatever you got under the sun to try to ruin it. And if they're not willing to add remove all the sunsets, essentially at gunpoint. Not, hey, our agreement is working really great. You know what would really make us feel better would be if you guys would go ahead and let's erase those sunset clauses and make some of these restrictions more permanent. What do you say, new friend, Ayatollah? That's what a diplomat would do. And instead, America said, you better drop those sunsets or else. And they said no. And America broke the deal. And you can read in the news all the time, oh my God, Iran is breaking the deal. Iran is exceeding some limits. Well, that's not breaking the deal. It says in the deal that if America breaks the deal, then Iran has the right to start exceeding the limits in the deal. It's in the deal. They're not breaking it. We are.
I can't remember if it's your law or Tom Wood's law, but whoever gets elected is basically John McCain. And
yeah, that's Tom.
It seemed like the last two before Trump, you knew they were in that club for some reason. You knew you were going to get John McCain. For whatever reason, it felt like Trump's not quite in that club. So at least there's an option that it could be good as far as foreign policy goes. Who's pushing this on him? I almost feel like he's being duped by, I don't know if it's Israel or neocons in his cabinet. Who's pushing this stuff onto Trump, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, about him being kind of a different animal. If you think about like the Patriot movement in the aftermath of Waco or something like that, these guys were very libertarian in a lot of ways, but they were not libertarians. At the end of the day, they're right-wing populists. And when George Bush came to power, they forgot all about being anti-government and decided what they really wanted was to invade Iraq or whatever he said. And they're very susceptible to just the narrative that the right-wing tough guy macho thing to do is blow up stuff. And if they have right-wing leadership, they'll get right behind it. And we can see this happening right now with the Trump voters who said, yeah, we're going to vote for him because he's anti-war. He said he wants to end the endless wars and whatever. Now he says, you know who I really hate is Iran. And they go, yeah, Iran, and rally around him. And not to a man, but that's essentially the populist right. And that's who he is. He's the populist right. Even though, yeah, he's a billionaire and is not exactly a man of the people, but he's from Queens, not Manhattan, right? Like he is new money. He's not really one of them. And, I'm sure they've made him feel that way his whole life. But the idea is essentially that he's, 1/10 Ron Paul, but he's, really 90%, just kind of Fox News fan. Is essentially, he's a retired old golfing businessman who watches Fox, and he gets his opinions from General Jack Keane, and Jack Keane says we got to do something tough, and so that's enough. There is no substance there within Trump. Wherever he is a skeptic of the wasteful abuse of the cost of American power or this kind of thing. It's not enough for that annoyance to ever overcome the pressure for him to keep everything going and to look good and strong, doing tough, strong things like killing bad terrorists and what have you. So there's not enough skeptic of power in him to really, for anyone to ever really count on. So you do end up with John McCain because the rest of the entire, population of Washington, D.C. are all John McCain. He's completely surrounded by them from top to bottom. In fact, I saw Jack Keane, the general responsible for convincing Bush and Obama to do both failed surges in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he's up there on TV today, and he blames Iran for every death in the war in Syria. That wasn't America and our allies and the CIA and the Israelis and the Saudis supporting a bunch of terrorists to overthrow this, secular sovereign government. No. That was Iran invaded Syria and killed hundreds of thousands of people. And the war in Iraq, where 4,500 Americans died, more than 4,000 of them fighting the Sunni insurgency. No. He killed hundreds and hundreds. And now as the day progresses, I hear the numbers now. Almost 1,000 Americans were killed as though it was the Iran-backed Shiite insurgency we were fighting in Iraq War II instead of the Sunni insurgency that we were fighting on their behalf. And they just get away with these lies, and there's nobody there to resist them. Certainly Trump doesn't have the background knowledge. He's not the kind of guy who sits around reading and remembering stuff from back when. So he didn't know the first thing about it. So I saw them on Fox News today. One of these guys, I'm trying to remember which one it was, said, oh, look, this guy Soleimani, he's way worse than bin Laden or Zawahiri. Oh, really, huh? Except that they killed 3,000 American civilians. Their associates in Al-Qaeda in Iraq were the worst part of the Sunni insurgency that killed 4,000 Americans in Iraq War II. But meanwhile, anytime a Shiite killed an American, we're supposed to just pretend the lie that it was an Iranian that did it. An Iranian under the control of Soleimani. And then we're supposed to pretend that 500 is more than 4,000. Is more than 7,000 when you throw in the people in New York City. But, so the Hawks, essentially, to your question, there is absolutely the Israeli element there in, highlighting and focusing on Iran as their enemy. But there's also the military and State Department and CIA, national security establishment in America that will never forgive them for declaring independence from us in 1979. And for the hostage crisis and all of that. And the fact that Ronald Reagan sold the missiles a few years after that doesn't matter. They're still the enemy, even though that was 40 years ago. We have to hate them forever. And how dare they be anything like the dominant force in the region when that's the middle part of North America's job to be the dominant force in the Middle East. Everybody knows that. So,
well,
I think it's ingrained. It's ingrained. There's no one taking the other side of the argument. You know what I mean? There's no Houthi lobby in Washington to plead their side of the story.
I guess, I don't know, maybe a silver lining is that the anti-war left will come out of their 12-year slumber to wake up again. Who knows? It's Trump doing it. So therefore, bombing someone's bad at this point, maybe. Maybe.
Look at how successful the CIA was in getting liberals and progressives to believe that the worst thing about Trump was that he was insufficiently patriotic and he's just been impeached by the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives for holding up an arms deal with a country that's fighting a proxy war with Russia. So, the Democrats are about as worthless as they could possibly be right now. And that goes for their voters. On the far left, like real communists and socialists, there are principled anti-war people there. I guess some progressives. But the broad swath of the American left, first with the advent of Barack Obama, and then with the advent of the Russiagate scandal against Trump, have essentially all become Trumanite, Scoop Jackson, Cold Warriors. Yeah. It's crazy. It's just crazy. It's like Vietnam never happened. COINTELPRO never happened. Who do you love? The FBI.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this, Scott. Before we get you out of here, I had started off with this saying, I can't trust the corporate media and these voices that are going to explain what has exactly happened to me, but I can trust your voice. And tell people where they can read your stuff. Tell them about antiwar.com and all you guys do real quick.
Okay, sure. So I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com, but we've got really great everything there, all the viewpoints, all the news. The great Jason Ditz is on top of all these facts for you every day at news.antiwar.com. I'm also the editorial director of, I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com. I'm just the plain old director of the Libertarian Institute. And by the way, we're doing a fund drive right now. If anybody's interested in the Great Libertarian Institute, that's me and Sheldon Richmond and Pete Quinones, a.k.a. Mance Raider, and Kyle Anzalone, and great stable of writers over there. And we're wrapping up this fund drive with some matching funds there at libertarianinstitute.org. Then I'm on the radio in Los Angeles every Sunday morning for Anti-War Radio at 8:30 KPFK 90.7 FM in LA. You can find my full interview archive. I do, depends, but 5 or 10 interviews a week. And you can find the full interview archive, more than 5,000 interviews now, going back to 2003 at scotthorton.org. And then I wrote a book called Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. And there's an audio book of that as well. And that's all available at scotthorton.org and in the margins at the Libertarian Institute and so forth. So I think that's it. Antiwar.com, Libertarian Institute, scotthorton.org, and Fool's Errand.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here at this last minute request and giving us some of your time, Scott. Appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this special episode. My regular episode will be dropping in a few days, and I'll give you all the normal goodbyes and hellos on that episode. Thank you so much. I hope this helped you a lot, and you know where to tune into now when stuff goes down in the world of foreign policy. You guys take it easy.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.